So without any further ado, we're going to talk about election integrity, and I have my good friend, Rodney Wine. Come on, guys, give it up. Well, Rodney's coming up here. At the last election, we had 23 of us that went through poll watcher training. We were all greeters, and that's one of the reasons that we were one of 2 counties here in Virginia that actually took 8 of the 10 seats, from commissioner to clerk of court to the school board to the board of supervisors, and the list goes on. And it paid off for us this week. We had a situation where our planning commission wants to expand everything here in Frederick County. They wanted to take our planning commission from 14 people down to 7. Now, if you shrink that group, what do you think happens to the vote? How much easier is it to buy off 7 people? So with our good friend Charlie Markert, thank you, Charlie, who brought this to our Mountain Patriot attention on a Monday night, he says, we have a problem. So there was probably 8, 10 of us that went down to the Board of Supervisors the other night, and they unanimously decided to keep the Planning Commission at 14 people. We do not want to be another Fairfax. We do not want to be another Arlington. We do not want to be another DC. We are Frederick County. This is our home, and this is why we're doing this. So without any further ado, my great friend and brother, Mr. Rodney Wine. Here you go, Rodney. Thank you, brother. Great hat.
Thank you. You need your phone? My name is Rodney Wine. I'm the chair of the Frederick County Republican Committee's Election Integrity Subcommittee. And I'm here to talk to you about election integrity today and some of the things that you will be seeing this year, and specifically 3 areas that you need to watch. And those 3 areas are globalization, and you will see different aspects of that. Can you guys hear me in the back? I'm trying to figure out where to hold this at. Globalization, immigration, and then FirstNet/CISA. So globalization is generally ran by the World Economic Forum and the billionaires who like to hang out in Davos together and come up with different ways of trying to get us not to eat beef, and blaming the cows for carbonization of the atmosphere. They work hand in hand with the media and the George Soros and other liberal groups that like to push the idea of one world government, and that is what they're working for and towards. And of course, the media, well, one of the main ways that the World Economic Forum is trying to push globalization is through pushing illegal immigrants to saturate the countries throughout the world, and then take over those countries from the inside by the word democracy, and we'll get to that in a bit, but mob rule. According to Axios, there's a myth of a U.S.-Mexico open border. That was in October of 2023 that was put out. Then if you look at the next one from MSN, and I used a lot of liberal quotes here or websites and what they're putting out, because they're actually overwhelmed by the idea, and they can no longer hide the BS that the government's trying to sell. So the U.S. border officials tracked over 300,000 migrants in December 2023. So if you read that article, it will say that they came in contact with 320,000 illegal immigrants on the southern border. But they didn't say anything about the northern border. They didn't say anything about the East Coast or the West Coast. And people think, oh, the West Coast, what do you have to do? Yeah, either have to come in from Canada and go around a couple barriers, or you come up from Mexico and do a couple barrier hops and maybe a little swim, and you're in the country here. But you're forgetting we have thousands and thousands and thousands of containers the shipping containers from China, from Russia. And every day this happens, and they're full of not just goods, but people. So the World Economic Forum stated in June of 2023, the reason of immigration is aging and longevity, why it's time to rethink migration. So their quote was, the working age population in high income and many middle income countries is shrinking. This unprecedented demographic shift will see more countries turning to migrants to fill labor shortages. My argument again against that would be the labor shortages are caused by the saturation of the illegals here. If you have 50 jobs and you have 5,000 illegal immigrants, it's unlikely that an American corporation is going to pay a higher wage to an American citizen. So that's part of the way that they filter in the illegal immigrants. And the World Economic Forum likes to bring everybody on board. They try to get the corporations to back their ideas. They try to get the NGOs, who are ultimately paid by us through taxpayer funds, to help in those roles. And excuse me. Their last quote there is, the private sector will have an important role to play in ensuring the skills these migrants bring match those needed in destination countries. So I'll go into that a little bit more, but remember that if you have a country that needs laborers for the fields, that's where the type they bring in. But if you need security, cybersecurity, where are you going to get them? It looks like we're bringing in quite a few from India right now, in addition to the legal migration for those jobs as well. All right, so U.S. immigration officials came across, remember that, and this is a quote, 300,000 immigrants at the southern border in December, making it the highest number of people encountered in a single month in history. And that's the Washington Examiner, which is middle of the line. And again, this is not the East Coast or West Coast or northern border of them. So who are some of these private sector groups helping with illegal immigration? And I wrote down a few. Open Society Foundation is straight up George Soros funded directly, ran by his son now. Another big one is the Open Philanthropy Project. Having a hard time talking this morning, sorry about that. The Free Immigration Project, the Equal Justice America, American Immigration Lawyers Association, the Philadelphia Foundation, and Catholic Charities. I would encourage each of you to write down 2 of these. Go home and do a little research on them. Follow the money. Look at their board of directors and then look at what other boards those board of directors are on. And you will see that there's quite a network of these groups, and the board of directors are generally World Economic Forum group members that have been moved up through the ranks. And I'll give you a second to write that down. Can you guys see that? I don't know if I can make that bigger or not. Oops. Well, I'm not going to be able to get it where you can read it. So you have the Open Society Foundation, Free Immigration Project, American Immigration Lawyers Association, and that's one you will see a lot of these lawyers move out to take over the board positions on these NGOs, and as they're created or thought up. The Philadelphia Foundation, the Open Philanthropy Project, Equal Justice America, and Catholic Charities. And if you don't get a couple of them written down, see me afterwards if you're interested, and I'll give you the names of these as well. The Four Freedoms Fund is one that I just popped up a couple of days ago and was looking at. But Mackenzie Scott gave $10 million last year to this one alone. Mackenzie Scott is a billionaire who was the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos. So there's no shortage of funds in her pocket it's all a tax write-off to her, but where she puts the money, I didn't see it in my bank account, and I'm quite sure that none of you guys did as well. So why would they do this? Why would they push illegal immigration? And part of it is for the saturation from the companies, from their point of view, but they have to break us down. And what do we have in our country that the majority of countries in the world doesn't have? Well, we have patriots. We have patriots. Our borders are open. Our borders are saturated. It's porous. You can walk in any of the four ways and get into our country. But they have to kind of break us down from the inside, so they saturate this. But why would they do that specifically? And former ICE Chief Tom Homan made it really clear. Open borders are about giving Democrats future votes. And that's how it ties into election integrity. Former acting Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE Director Thomas Homan says Democrats' support for open borders is driven by their political future, viewing illegal aliens as potential voters. Well, in Virginia, we have certain criteria that you have to vote, right? You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be a Virginia resident. You have to be 18 years old. You have to, if you were a felon, you have to have had your rights restored, and you could not and cannot be declared mentally incompetent by a court in this jurisdiction. So curiously enough, if Joe Biden were to come and become a resident of Virginia, technically he wouldn't be able to, no, I'm just kidding. No court has declared him yet, but hopefully we'll get there soon. So during the House Oversight and Accountability Committee hearing this week, Homan was asked by Jim Jordan what the motivations were by President Joe Biden's driving up the nation's foreign-born population to nearly 50 million. You hear and you look at DHS, and what do they say on their count? They say that there's about 10.5 million illegals in our country. And that's total BS. Hell, if you go downtown and sit there and listen to the people who are walking past, speaking fluent Spanish, speaking fluent Japanese, well, not so much Japanese, but Chinese, and listen to the fact that they aren't speaking English, and then ask them a question. Ask them any question. What do you have the time? Anything like that. They'll look at you stupid. They do not understand a word we're saying. And that doesn't mean that everybody who doesn't speak English here is here illegally. But the vast majority you can pick up. You look at their clothing. If their clothing is unlikely made here in the U.S. and they can't speak English, it's likely they haven't been here long. And it's a real high probability that they're here illegally. I know in our school systems, my daughter's school, Millbrook over here, it looks like 20 to 25% are Hispanics that those kids speak English, but I know when some of their families and stuff come to gatherings, they don't speak English. And they may have very well have been here for a while, but it's highly likely that they're not here legally. So future voting. Now, this came out on Breitbart on the January 18th, and this was Jim Jordan again speaking. The way I look at it, we're on pace to hit 12 million migrants coming into the country under Biden administration. That's the magnitude of this phenomenon. That's equal to or equivalent to the entire population of our state, the state of Ohio. In 4 years, you have a population equal to, well, actually not even 4 years, a little over 3 years. You have the population of the state of Ohio that has come into our country illegally. Saturation. We, of course, have a federal republic, but there's a bastardization of the word democracy. And if you read any of the Founding Fathers' papers, you will see that they're talking about democracy in the terms of a utopian democracy in which everyone works perfectly together, everything is equal and ran as it should be. Now, we know that doesn't happen because nobody's perfect here. Of course, the word democracy means the power of the people. It comes from Greek, demo for population or people, kratos meaning the strength of it, and the strength of the people, this means directly, and it equals mob rule. Pritzker, who is the governor of Illinois, little skinny fella, he signed a new bill allowing eligible non-U.S. citizens in Illinois to become police officers. Illegals can become police officers and enforce laws that you guys have no right to enforce. Of course, they obviously have no right to enforce, but under Pritzker and the legislature in Illinois, they made that happen. The measure, House Bill 3751, successfully passed the Democratic-controlled State House and Senate before being signed into law last week, and it became the law January 1st, 2024. So now if you go to Illinois, you as a law-abiding citizen can be pulled over and given a ticket by an illegal, somebody's here who should not be here, and somebody who is not abiding by the law and is, in fact, a criminal for breaking into our country and is a criminal for staying here every day that they're here illegally. I'm looking forward to that ticket because I'm going to tell them, I don't think I'm going to let you write me a ticket today. I don't know if any of you watched, like Western movies, I've watched the movie Tombstone, but when the sheriff of the city came to arrest Wyatt Earp, who was Kurt Russell, he said, "I don't think I'm going to let you arrest me today." So that's my little takeoff of it there. States including California and Colorado have begun to pass laws that will permit non-citizens who are authorized to work in the U.S. to become police officers, while others such as New Jersey are debating the same thing. So that's specifically for DACA, which are people who are here illegally, who have been here for quite a long time, and have no right to enforce any laws on American citizens. The Founding Fathers on democracies, and this is not the pure democracy that they kind of write about in their papers, but this is the ones that you see in the world here today and that they saw in the world in various parts at their time. Democracies have been found incompatible with personal security and the rights and property, and in general has been short-lived, has been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their death. James Madison. It's been observed that a pure democracy, if it were practicable, would be the perfect government, and that's what they had written on about the perfect democracy. Experience has proved that no position is more false than this. The ancient democracies in which people themselves deliberated never possessed one good feature of government. Their very character was tyranny and their figure deformity. That's Alexander Hamilton. And this is my favorite from Thomas Jefferson. I think myself that we have more machinery of government than is necessary. Amen. Too many parasites living on the labor of the industrious. Government big enough to supply everything, and remember this specifically, government big enough to supply everything you need is big enough to take everything you have. Right. And the course of history shows us that as government grows, liberty decreases. Yeah. The two enemies of the people are criminals and government. Curiously how they intermesh too. So let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution to the second, so that the second will not become the legalized version of the first. And what do we see in the news this week is, in the last couple of weeks, the state of Texas decided to enforce their border and stop the invasion, protecting their state, which they have the right to do. And we're curiously watching to see what our special needs president does in response to this, or what he's allowed to do by his handlers. So the government that is big enough to give you everything is the government that is big enough to take everything. Well, guess what? We have the biggest government in the world that has ever existed in the world. This is, the writer of this is a guy named Tyler Durden, and he writes, let me give you some numbers that illustrate what I'm talking about. Approximately 3 million people work directly for the federal government. Now, there's another 1.5 million people who are actually getting retirement checks. So they can be brought back anytime for the needs of the government. The federal government spent $6.13 trillion with a TR, trillion dollars in 2023. That figure is larger than the GDP in every nation on the entire planet except for the US and China. More than 70 million Americans are on Social Security. More than 65 million Americans are on Medicare. More than 81 million Americans are on Medicaid, and more than 41 million Americans are on food stamps. What do we not see in that list? How many illegals are on Social Security? How many illegals are on Medicare and Medicaid and food stamps? Yeah, a fair amount, if not all. Of course, there are many more programs that hand out money to the population on a regular basis. We've reached a stage where most U.S. households are at least partially dependent on the federal government. We very much prefer not to call ourselves socialists, but that is precisely what we are. Sadly, if we were to go back 100 years, most Americans wouldn't know how to survive. And I would tell you, I would argue that when the power went out 2 years ago in the ice storm here, my neighbors had no heat. They had no food. So we brought them to our house, and of course, my wife's telling me to be quiet, but I'm lecturing them. You should have food. You should have a backup heat source. But they didn't. But they got a good lecture. I figure if I got them in a house that's warm and I'm put food in front of them when they're hungry, they at least have to listen by default, right? You're going down the road and the birds are chirping, you hear it whether you want to hear it or not. So I chirped at them for a while. According to the Pew Research, 10.5 illegals in the U.S. in 2021. That's the ones that are existing here. The most common country of birth for unauthorized immigrants is Mexico. However, the population of unauthorized immigrants from Mexico dropped by 900,000 from 2017 to 2021, down to 4.1 million. Now, curiously, what happened in 2017? You know, it's a guy named Trump, and he kicked them back across the border, and that's what needs to happen now. There were increases in unauthorized immigrants from nearly every other region of the world: Central America, the Caribbean, South America, Asia, Europe, and Sub-Saharan. And this is that research, which is funded generally by Soros, says 4.6% of U.S. workers in 21 were unauthorized immigrants. I'd say they're probably 80% off. It's probably up around 20%. Global Countries Freedom Ranking. It's a annual report by Freedom House. The world has had 15 consecutive years of declining global freedoms. The United States has dropped from a rating of 92 out of 100 down to 83 out of 100, with the last year being rated was 2021 because they didn't have enough data. I'll throw in a little something to make you laugh here. This shining knight in armor with his armored face mask on the left here is our warrior who protects Virginia, the U.S. Senator from Virginia, Tim Kaine. You may not recognize him by his armor because he's ready to fight for your rights, so he's covering it up with that face mask. The little peach of a child to the right there is his son. This little peach, Linwood Kane. This is his mugshot from when he was arrested in Minnesota trying to break up a rally of Donald Trump in 2017. 24-year-old Linwood Woody Kane, son of Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, was one of a group of protesters who disrupted a rally in support of President Donald Trump. The clash quickly turned violent. This little jackass attacked the police when they went to arrest him. It didn't work out well for him. Got a little scuffed and bruised, they said, but I guess that's what happens. I don't think he got much of a fine, if any, and I think he was out in a day or so. So the third thing you need to watch this year specifically is a U.S. government authority named FirstNet. And the whole idea behind FirstNet is to have reliable communications available for all first responders and any agencies such as FEMA that go into a disaster area. And this FirstNet is to guarantee that communications during a disaster is not overwhelming the system, and that they can still get communications to and the materials and people to where they're needed. Empowering America's first responders with FirstNet, the only nationwide communications network created with and for public safety. When emergencies happen, first responders need fast, reliable communications. So the entire idea of FirstNet as it was sold is an excellent idea. We all want to be able to help people in need here in the U.S. If somebody's house is on fire or there's a forest fire coming down in a large community, everybody's trying to call their loved ones. All their loved ones are trying to call them, and it quickly overwhelms a cell tower or if it's large enough, can put a jam into the internet. So the idea of this is great. So FirstNet was first launched with AT&T in 2018. It was thought up in, I think, 2013, and was launched with a price tag of, I think, about $45 billion. They came up with a plan, and every governor in all 50 states signed off on it. It was a good idea. But good things are always bastardized and taken advantage of. And we have another agency in the United States called CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The private sector is primarily responsible for protecting sector infrastructure and assets. CISA helps the private sector predict, anticipate, and respond to sector outages. So you've got the FirstNet. I may have skipped one here. I did. Let's go back to FirstNet. First responders, there are at the outset 27,000 agencies across the country that took advantages of the benefits of FirstNet. Now this doesn't say 27,000 fire halls had access. This doesn't say 27,000 hospitals had access. This says 27,000 plus agencies. Now agencies are usually have some variation of a 3 alphabet term, and 27,000 agencies is a lot of agencies. So again, they were first launched in 2018, and by the end of 2019, FirstNet had 750,000 connections. Now, try to get a list of the connections, you can't do it. You have to have something in government, credentials in government that I have never seen before nor heard of. So FirstNet was launched, and it was launched in partnership with AT&T, and I'd skip that, but that's very important that you realize AT&T is in on that. So CISA, the intelligence community, said Friday that no voting machines were tampered with during the 2016 elections, and this, I believe, was in 2022 during a court case against Raffensperger and Brian Kemp. So the intelligence community said Friday that no voting machines were tampered with during the 2016 elections, but the breadth of the Russian cyber activity throughout the campaign raised the specter that the election infrastructure is vulnerable to digital intruders. We'll get to that. Designating voting systems or any other election system as critical infrastructure would be a vast federal overreach, the cost of which would not equally improve the security of elections in the United States. So the private sector is primarily responsible for protecting sector infrastructure and assets. CISA helps the private sector predict, anticipate, and respond to sector outages. This guy, Obama, you guys might have heard of him, on Friday, January 6th, curiously enough on the date, January 6, 2017, announced that it was designated the country's election infrastructure as critical and brought that under the CISA oversight. Now, I bet not many of you knew this. So you've got FirstNet that can reach 27,000 agencies, and you have CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and Obama, about 2 weeks before he moves out of the White House, designates elections as critical infrastructure. And going on, it says the intelligence community said Friday no voting machines were tampered with during the 2016 elections. One of the sections under CISA is a wireless priority service, under FirstNet, and it is widely available from AT&T Mobility, AT&T FirstNet, T-Mobile, and Verizon Wireless. And this wireless priority service is also under CISA. So you've got AT&T that is supposed to be getting all the information out to different responders that they need to be in the 27,000 agencies who are going to come running when you have an emergency. Now they're covered under CISA, and AT&T is there as well. T-Mobile and Verizon as well, but AT&T is the main player. FirstNet insecurities. And this was, I think in 2020. AT&T is concealing vital cybersecurity reporting about its FirstNet phone network for first responders in the U.S. military, according to Ron Wyden, who said the network has been dubbed unsafe by CISA. Now, if you guys are familiar with Ron Wyden, he's probably one of the biggest jackasses in the Congress, and he's one of the most liberal there is. So when he says that this is a major screw-up, that there are issues with this, and the reporting is a problem and AT&T is covering it up, you should take note. This is in 2020. These phone network vulnerabilities are widely exploited or being actively exploited to conduct cross-border surveillance. At issue is a signaling system number 7, and it goes on to say how it's vulnerable and allows people to redirect cell phones, give cell phone locations, read incoming text messages and snoop on calls, and more. So what is the and more? This guy, Kevin Skoglund, is a internet security specialist, and he says AT&T and Verizon and so on try and protect us as best they can, the security of their phone network from the rest of the internet, but it's still part of the internet. There can still be security holes that allow hackers to get into the phone network. The 35 systems, and he's talking about election systems now, the 35 systems that Skoglund's team found represent a fraction of total voting systems nationwide, though he believes they only captured a portion of the systems that are or have been online. Earlier this week, Skoglund showed NBC 3 election systems that were still online even after officials had been told they were vulnerable. And this guy, Alex Halderman, is a computer scientist and election security specialist. On January 18th, in the case going on in Georgia, Curling v. Raffensperger, who is the Secretary of State of Georgia, on January 18th, a Georgia court witnessed a demonstration by a voting system expert. The expert, J. Alex Halderman, who is a professor of computer science and engineering at the University of Michigan, showed how Dominion voting systems, this is the Dominion voting systems that could never be hacked, that the Assistant Director of Homeland Security swore in 2020 that it could not be hacked. We are not using Dominion here. We're using ES&S, and I'll get to that in a second. Showed how Dominion voting system machines can be hacked effortlessly using a BIC pen and a smart card. And this is really funny because the Dominion is part of the defense right now because they're getting sued by these voters who were charged with racketeering in another Trump case. He borrowed a pen from the defense attorneys. And then he used that pen and a smart card, and he was able to copy, edit, and alter votes within seconds. He's got the computer in front of the judge. The judge is watching the screen, and he does that right in front of her. Her name was Totenberg. The demonstration took place in front of a U.S. district judge in Atlanta, and that was on the 18th of January, 2024. In 2022, federal cybersecurity officials had verified that there were software vulnerabilities in certain ballot marking devices made by Dominion voting systems, which were discovered during another Georgia court case, which could allow, in theory, a malicious actor to tamper with the devices, according to a draft analysis by CNN. And again, I'm using these liberal reporting to realize and help you realize that if these people were reporting this in 2022, and we're just kind of figuring it out now, that means that we're not watching well enough. As a nation, we're not watching well enough. The vulnerabilities have never been exploited in an election, and doing so would require physical access to voting equipment and other extraordinary criteria standard election security practices prevent, according to CISA. Back in 2022, the Dominion voting systems were checked over by a guy named J. Alex Halderman. And give me a couple more minutes. Almost done, Dana. Dana's back there doing this to hurry it up. But if you do some digging on Halderman, he's one of the best security experts in elections and one of the best computer scientists. But in 2022, he was given access to these Dominion voting systems and was able to hack them. So right now in Virginia, we have ES&S, and it came out in 2022 that ES&S had illegally put modems on some of their scanners. Supposedly none in Virginia, and we're working on that to make sure that none were. Trying to get a statement from them through the State Board of Elections. Curling v. Raffensperger is one of the cases you need to watch. So I'm going to bring it all together. The World Economic Forum wants one world government. That's their goal. They state it. They make no qualms about it. They want subservient groups to work for them. Patriots aren't subservient. We know our rights, we know our liberties, we know our Second Amendment, and we know how to use our Second Amendment. Leftists want to take over the elections by saturating their country with illegal immigrants and by not only allowing them to vote, but to police us as well. So imagine if the Virginia legislature were to be controlled by Democrats, and the Virginia Senate controlled by Democrats, and the Virginia governor was a Democrat. So right now, what's happening is all the Democrats in the House of Delegates and the Virginia Senate are coming up with bills to limit assault weapons bans. They don't know what an assault weapon is. They don't know what a semi-automatic is, but they're going to ban it. So if they come up with a law that says you have to be between 30 and 35 years old to vote, what happens? You go to vote anyway, and these illegals arrest you. I mean, that's one of their ultimate goals, is to be in charge and enforceable, make it enforceable where we have to be subservient to them or else. So what do? We vote, we get involved. You can become a poll watcher. You can become an officer of election, a greeter outside. Do your research, know what you're talking about. When you're talking to a Democrat, if you can stomach it, you should know what you're talking about, and you have to be able to give them an argument and justify it. You can't just repeat what you saw in the news. You have to know the basics of it. So at very little, take 10 minutes a day and scan through the news. And when you come across something exciting about elections or the border or illegal immigrants, stop and read it. Because at the end of the day, I guarantee you that you've done 10 minutes on something else that was probably worthless, that you could have been learning about this. And pass the word to your neighbors, friends, and family, whether they like it or not. Tough love. It's my daughter, she's 15. Oh, Dad, I can't even vote. I said, but when you are able to, you're going to damn well know what you're talking about.
Amen.
All righty. So my name is Rodney. Yeah.
Who dictates what voting machines we use in
The State Board of Elections has a list of voting machines that can be used. ES&S is actually one of the better ones.
Do we have to use voting machines? They're going away.
Well, the idea in my mind is to go to paper ballots.
They're going away.
Vote on election
going
day
away.
only.
Is that they're going away.
You cannot now, no. But that's what we're working for, or some of us are working for.